This is BBC World News. I'm Geeta Gurumurthy. As we come on air, some breaking news from Germany. The successor to Angela Merkel will be her favoured successor. For the leadership of the CDU party, this is the scene live in Hamburg at the Congress. In other news, William Barr returns as Attorney General, a job he did last 25 years ago. He'll oversee the Russia investigation. Heather Nauert used to present for Fox News. Now the president's put her forward for ambassador to the UN.
She's very talented, very smart, very quick, and I think she's going to be respected by all.
French students clash with police as the country prepares for more anti-government protests this weekend. And the comedian Kevin Hart gives up the job of hosting the Academy Awards just days after the announcement. We'll look at why. Hello and welcome to BBC World News. In the last few minutes, Angela Merkel's CDU party has just been voting for its successor to replace Angela Merkel as its leader, and it has elected Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer as the new leader. Well, the 56-year-old is the former Prime Minister of the German state of Saarland, and she is seen as a protégé of Mrs. Merkel. The nearest other candidate was Friedrich Merz, a fierce critic of Mrs. Merkel. This is the scene live in Hamburg where that vote has just been announced, and delegates there applauding as they find out that Mrs. Merkel's protégé has been announced as her successor. That will make Mrs. Merkel's tenure much easier. She is set to continue as Chancellor of Germany, the country's leader politically, for the next couple of years. But the party leadership now has been anointed. Let's go to Jenny Hill, who is there for us. Jenny, just tell us what's happened in the last few moments.
Yeah, this is a profoundly historic moment for not just the CDU, but for Germany, perhaps for the rest of the world too. Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, the woman that Germans refer to as AKK, has just been voted in as the replacement to Angela Merkel, as the leader of this party, but she will be widely now considered to be in the running as the potentially next German Chancellor. She is Angela Merkel's preferred candidate. She shares a great deal of Angela Merkel's style, Angela Merkel's politics. She's a centrist. She tends to take the similar approach to Angela Merkel when it comes to dealing in politics, in that she runs relatively calm, relatively analytical. So she will be seen as someone who is likely to continue along the track of which Angela Merkel has set, not just for the party, of course, but for this country. In the last couple of minutes, she's taken to the podium, wiping away tears, looking somewhat overwhelmed, actually, as she thanked the delegates in this hall for their trust. It is a huge moment for her, a huge moment for this country, and a huge moment, too, for Angela Merkel, who, of course, is now handing over some of her power to Frau Kramp-Karrenbauer. They will have to work together. Mrs. Merkel has said she wants to continue as the German Chancellor until the end of her term in 2021. It's hard to say how much longer Mrs. Merkel will be in that job. Many people in this room think it's very, very unlikely that she'll stay till the end of her term. We'll have to wait and see. She already works very well with Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who is at the moment the General Secretary of this party. But times change. Mrs. Kramp-Karrenbauer has intimated herself that she has sharp political elbows. It may be that she wants to emerge relatively quickly as the next German Chancellor. Very difficult to say at this stage, but a little earlier on we heard from Mrs. Merkel, who gave what was her farewell speech as party leader to this conference. She received rapturous applause, a standing ovation which went on for 10 minutes. Most of the people in this room think that this is the beginning of perhaps a very long farewell to politics. Nonetheless, a farewell to politics it is.
And Jenny, just explain the power split between being party leader and Chancellor. How does that work?
Yeah, here in Germany, the two don't necessarily go in hand. It's possible to be party leader and it's possible to have a separate chancellor. Traditionally, one person has done both jobs. And Angela Merkel has herself always said that doing the two jobs actually is very important. It avoids any kind of friction erupting between the party leader and the Chancellor, for example. So this is something which Germans aren't particularly familiar with, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this particular relationship works out. As I say, Mrs. Merkel and Mrs. Kramp-Karrenbauer do get on well, they work together well, they have very similar politics and outlooks, but the challenge ahead of them is huge. They're fighting populism, they're fighting the fragmentation of the German political landscape, the European political landscape. The CDU was once one of Germany's big parties, one of its Volksparteien of the centre-right, as opposed to the centre-left Social Democrats. They're losing votes to smaller movements like the far-right AfD. The Green Party is on the rise here. This party has a lot of work to do, and they'll be looking ahead, of course, too, to the European elections. Mrs. Merkel knows that she's got a deal of work to do there as well if she and other leaders are to fight the populist tide, which in some respects has been engulfing parts of Europe. So there's a lot of work ahead, but I think in some respects the sense in this hall today has also been that Angela Merkel, the era of Angela Merkel, is now starting to draw to a close.
OK, Jenny Hill, many thanks indeed. Let's head now to the United States because President Trump has just announced 2 new recruits to his administration. He's chosen a former Fox News journalist, Heather Nauert, to take up the role of US ambassador to the United Nations. Possibly even more crucially, he's nominated William Barr to take up the role of Attorney General, replacing Jeff Sessions. It is a key role because he will take charge of the Mueller investigation into charges of Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Here's the president outlining his decision.
I want to confirm that Bill Barr, one of the most respected jurists in the country, highly respected lawyer, former Attorney General under the Bush administration, respected by Republicans and respected by Democrats. He will be nominated for the United States Attorney General. I also want to inform you that Heather Nauert, somebody that we know very well, who's done a great job at as working with Mike Pompeo and others over at the State Department. Heather Nauert will be nominated. She's going to work with Nikki Haley to replace Nikki at the United Nations. She'll be ambassador to the United Nations. She's very talented, very smart, very quick, and I think she's going to be respected by all.
Well, let's get more now on all that from our correspondent Gary O'Donoghue, who is in Washington. Gary, first of all, on William Barr, how is this announcement being received?
Well, I think it's been floated around for a few days, so there's not a great deal of surprise this announcement. I mean, it's an interesting and I think pretty smart choice by the president, given that William Barr has been Attorney General before. That means he has a track record. That means he knows how it works, and that will smooth his confirmation process through the Senate as well. And bear in mind that Republicans have an increased majority in the Senate, so that helps as well. Yes, of course, he might end up overseeing the Mueller inquiry. It depends how long that goes on for, because the Senate confirmation process could take several months. So Robert Mueller may have all been done and dusted by then. So, but there's a potential for him having to take that over. Democrats will be concerned on a couple of areas. One, his support for President Trump in firing James Comey, although his support was based on what Comey had done prior to the election rather than after the general elections, and he supported that for different reasons, if you like. And he was pretty much supportive of Donald Trump when it comes to further investigations into the Clintons, which he's mentioned before. So there will be some stuff for the Democrats to get their teeth into during that confirmation process, but I would think it would be a reasonable, fair chance that it'll get through, even if it takes a little time.
And a TV journalist taking up the United Nations job.
Yeah, this is Heather Nauert, who's a former presenter on Fox News, of course, beloved Fox News of the president. He's also seen her in operation as the chief spokesperson at the State Department. She's gained the confidence and respect of Mike Pompeo there, the Secretary of State. And Donald Trump clearly has liked the way she's handled that brief. So her name's been floated around for a while, ever since Nikki Haley announced her decision to step down from there. So it's taken a little while for her nomination to be confirmed. So that will happen. I think there'll be some questions over her lack of direct diplomatic experience, and also whether or not it'll be a cabinet role. Nikki Haley was in the cabinet. There's some debate over whether or not Heather Nauert will actually be in the cabinet. Of course, if she's not, if that's what the president does decide to do, that'll send a pretty clear message to the United Nations about how important he thinks that body is.
And can you just give us a sense, Gary, of what else you're looking out for in terms of developments around Mueller and the other investigations going on in Washington today?
Well, we're expecting today another couple of key documents from the special counsel's investigation. We're expecting the sentencing memos on behalf of Michael Cohen, President Trump's erstwhile lawyer. Of course, he's been cooperating with the special counsel, not just on some issues relating to campaign finance, although that was a separate investigation, but he's been cooperating on the Russian element of this as well. And we now know that Michael Cohen has acknowledged that he lied to Congress last year about the extent to which the Trump organization was negotiating over putting up a building in Moscow during 2016, how long that went on for. But he is now cooperating, so we'll get some recommendations from Robert Mueller on how long he should go to jail for, if at all. And also we'll get some details about the Paul Manafort case. And you remember Paul Manafort was the campaign chairman. He's already been found guilty on 8 charges of fraud and tax evasion in a Virginia court trial. We're now going to learn why Robert Mueller decided to end a plea agreement he had with him, because the special counsel believed he'd been lying to prosecutors as part of that deal.
OK, we will leave it there. Gary, thanks very much. Large-scale security measures are being put into place across France, with Paris going into semi-lockdown on Saturday over fears of more street violence. But it's already started today. Protesters run from burning bins and have been clashing with police after violent protests. Students have also been blocking access to high schools around France in protest against education reforms. Well, the French Retail Federation has announced it's lost around €1 billion in revenue since these protests began some 3 weeks ago. The French Interior Minister Christophe Castaner has promised the authorities will show no tolerance towards violent radicals planning more protests.
As the Prime Minister indicated yesterday, 8,000 members of the security forces will be present in Paris. They will have armoured vehicles at their disposal. These are not tanks, but specialised vehicles of the gendarmerie that will help remove barricades.
We can go now to Paris and get more from our correspondent there, Hugh Schofield. Hugh, just give us an update on what is going on there today and what is the expectation for the weekend?
Well, I've just been out on the Champs-Élysées. It is pretty much as you would expect on a busy Friday, but quite soon it'll start emptying. And right now they're beginning to do what they're going to be doing for many hours now, which is boarding up the shops. Basically every shop, at least at the top end of the Champs-Élysées going towards the Arc de Triomphe, is having big plexiglass or metal or wooden boards put up over anything that can be smashed. And that's in preparation for tomorrow, obviously. I've seen police going around putting stickers on cars saying, for God's sake, move your car if you don't want it to be a smouldering wreck on Sunday morning. And I've seen gas company people looking down manhole covers to make sure there aren't stashes of projectiles hidden down there. So, you know, there is a real security operation that's kicking in right now. In a few hours' time, the Champs-Élysées will be absolutely deserted. They'll remain deserted overnight, when there will be thousands of riot police arriving and parking down the Champs-Élysées in preparation for this day tomorrow, which, you know, maybe will pass off peaceably, but I mean, there's every expectation and fear that it won't.
And is there more knowledge now from the authorities as to who is making up the protesters? What sort of disparate groups might be involved?
Well, I think it was fairly clear from last Saturday that we have 2 or 3 groups that are causing the trouble. Around the country, you know, there are tens of thousands of yellow vests, but most of them don't come to Saturday's protests in Paris. The people who come to Saturday's protests in Paris tend to be the sort of hardliners in the movement who want to have a confrontation with the police. At least among the several thousand who were here last week, there were clearly people who knew perfectly well that was what was going to happen. Along with them are people who are from radical groups of the revolutionary far left and the revolutionary far right who see this as a great occasion, an opportunity that they cannot possibly afford to miss. In their theories of revolution, this is how it begins. So they're there as well. And the fear is that they'll be there tomorrow, on top of which there may well be people who've come in from the banlieue, people who come in just to cause trouble, vandals who were there last week as well, as I witnessed personally. They were the ones setting fire to cars because they've got huge experience of setting fire to cars, I'm afraid. So it's those groups. It's a disparate lot of of political and non-political people who are prepared to take on the police, and the fear is that among them will be people who want to go even further to provoke the police into an overreaction, blood being shed, and then we're in a wholly new territory.
Hugh Schofield in Paris, thanks very much. The Chinese technology giant Huawei says that the arrest of its chief financial officer at the request of the United States is designed to exert pressure on the company. Meng Wanzhou faces a bail hearing in Vancouver later today, but in the meantime, Huawei has been trying to reassure its global customers. Our Beijing correspondent Stephen McDonald has more.
Finally, there could be some sort of a concrete indication of what she's facing in those extradition proceedings to the United States. However, she could also just be having a sort of initial appearance with very little information at all. But the latest theory is that the Huawei executive is to be accused of some sort of high-level financial manoeuvres whereby money is put through various banks as a way of getting around US sanctions against investments in Iran. But if anyone thought that this was all going to be over and done with quickly, they might have to think again, because if she fights this extradition to the United States, legal experts are saying this could go on for months or even years. Naturally, one of the things to be discussed today will be whether or not she's to be granted bail, because one possibility is for Huawei's chief financial officer to be remanded in custody as she awaits her day in court.
Stephen McDonald there. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. Much more ahead here. More on the breaking news in the last few minutes that Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, Angela Merkel's protégé, has been picked to succeed her as leader of the CDU.
John Lennon was shot at the entrance to the Dakota building in the center of New York. There's been a crowd here standing in more or less silent vigil, and the flowers have been piling up.
The 14th ceasefire of this war ended at the walls of the old city of Dubrovnik. This morning, witnesses said shells were landing every 20 seconds.
People are celebrating the passing of a man they hold responsible for hundreds of deaths and oppression. Elsewhere, people have been gathering to mourn his passing.
Imelda Marcos, the widow of the former president of the Philippines, has gone on trial in Manila. She's facing 7 charges of tax evasion. She pleaded not guilty.
The Prince and Princess of Wales are to separate. A statement from Buckingham Palace said the decision had been reached amicably.
This is BBC World News. I'm Geeta Gurumuthy. Our top story: Germany's Christian Democrats have chosen Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer as their new party leader. She will succeed Angela Merkel and is now seen as a strong candidate to take over as Chancellor too. Let's stay with that story now. And the breaking news that Angela Merkel's replacement as leader of her party will be her protégé Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. We can speak now to Professor Stefan Marshall, political scientist based at the University of Düsseldorf. Thanks very much for joining us today. What are your thoughts on this announcement? We've just had it in the last 15-20 minutes or so.
Yeah, it was a very tough race between different candidates. And in the end, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, who is the protege of Angela Merkel, has won. That was kind of a surprising win in some ways. You have to see that she just got 52% of the votes. The competitor, Friedrich Merz, he got 48%. So that was very tight. And let's see whether it's possible to conciliate the party again.
And what will she bring now, and how much power will she have?
Well, for now, she's just the chairperson of the Christian Democratic Union of the party. But sooner or later, she will be or become the candidate for the chancellorship too. She will replace Angela Merkel sooner or later. So she's not only to be kind of leading person of a party, but she might end up to be the leading person of this country. So in that way, she is a powerful person, and that was a very historic moment of time today.
So what can you tell us about her politics, how she would lead Europe, for example? Obviously, Germany, phenomenally influential in this continent.
Well, we don't know that much about her foreign policy issues or positions so far. I mean, she has been the governor of a small state in Germany, of the Saarland. There she did kind of very efficient and very value-driven policy. She is a little bit more conservative than Angela Merkel is. But when it comes to European politics or foreign policy, she is very close, so she will try to follow the footsteps of Angela Merkel, I'm sure about that.
And what about Friedrich Merz? What happens to him now, and how difficult will it be to reconcile the party?
It will be difficult. There was kind of a really tough competition, and there were a lot of debates. And obviously, there's a conflict or a divide within the party between those who favored Friedrich Merz and those who were in favor of Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. So in that way, we will see whether that works. It depends a little bit now on Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, whether she's able to really bridge the gap and to reach out for the other side in the party. But that's, I guess, well, not that difficult. Perhaps you have to see that the CDU is not that much a programmatic party, but a pragmatic party. So in the end, I think they will find common ground again. OK,
Professor Stefan Marshall, thank you very much. Let's have a look at some more of the day's news now. And a British paedophile has been ordered to pay more than £100,000 to 5 men in the Philippines after a judge decided he abused them as children in the 1980s. Douglas Slade was never convicted of the offences. The men's lawyer described it as a landmark case for the London High Court. Yemeni government officials say the country's main international airport could be reopened if planes are inspected before landing there. The proposal has been made at peace talks in Sweden, the first time since the two sides of the civil war have met since 2016. The airport's been closed for 2 years because of the conflict between the Yemeni government and Houthi rebels. For the first time in history, the UN says more than half the world's population is online. It estimates that by the end of this year, 3.9 billion people will have access to the internet. The biggest growth is in developing countries, including African nations. The American comedian Kevin Hart has stepped down as the host of next year's Oscars ceremony after criticism of tweets he posted years ago as being homophobic. Hart said he didn't want to be a distraction on Oscars night and that he was sorry he had hurt people. Our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mazimba reports.
Hey, Kevin, looking down the line, right?
It was only a few days ago that the Academy announced that Kevin Hart, once an invited guest at the Oscars, was to be the next host of a show watched by millions. But that was before it emerged that the comedian turned actor had a decade earlier made homophobic comments in his stand-up show and on social media. His response didn't help. It actually made things worse.
My team calls me, oh my God, Kevin, the world is upset about tweets you did years ago. Oh my God. Guys, I'm almost 40 years old. If you don't believe that people change, grow, evolve as they get older, I don't know what to tell you.
Move on. The Academy asked him to apologise, but he refused.
I chose to pass. I passed on the apology. The reason why I passed is because I've addressed this several times. This is not the first time this has come up. I've addressed it. I've spoken on it. I've said where the rights and wrongs were. I've said who I am now versus who I was then. I've done it. I've done it.
Within hours, he'd changed his mind and stood down from hosting, finally apologising to the LGBTQ community. Over the last few years, Kevin Hart has been seen as one of entertainment's most exciting new talents, appearing on screen with some of Hollywood's biggest names in films like Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. As well as more serious-edged roles, his next film sees him caring for a quadriplegic millionaire played by Bryan Cranston. But many believe he should have handled this week's events far, far better.
Hell yeah! My bad, man.
If he's going to be on that mainstream stage, he's got to adjust his act. He should have been faster to apologise. It was very mealy-mouthed. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry, oh, I'm better. The whole thing's a mess. There's no winners here.
And that includes the Oscars themselves. With the ceremony now fewer than 3 months away, they're now searching for a new host, someone they're sure won't end up being surrounded by controversy in the same way that Kevin Hart has. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News.
Let me just remind you of our top story. Angela Merkel's CDU party has elected Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer as its new party leader. The 56-year-old is a former leader of the German state of Saarland. She is seen as a protégé of Mrs. Merkel. The nearest other candidate was Friedrich Merz, a fierce critic of Mrs. Merkel. The vote split, with 48.25% going to Mr. Merz and 51.75% going to Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. Very close, but the winner announced in the last 30 minutes. Much more online. I'm at Geetha Gurumuthy, and much more, of course, on our website on those German votes. Well, thanks for watching.